My name is Michelle Jackson. I am a podcaster, digital media content, or digital content creator like all of you guys. I'm obviously, or no, nothing obvious. I'm also a blogger, and I decided to create this panel for podcast movement specifically, and then I was like, well, it makes sense to also bring this panel to FinCon. And part of the reason why I thought it would be a good fit for FinCon is because there are a lot of people who are thinking about going into podcasting who, or they may be podcasting, but they haven't started monetizing yet. For podcast movement, those people, a lot of them have never blogged before, so they have no blogging skills. But for you guys, you may have the skills, but you're not sure how to apply them to your show. So that being said, I have a website called Michelle is Bunny Hungry, a podcast called Girl Gone Frugal again, and then another podcast called Square State about Colorado. Jamie is going to introduce herself next. There you go.
We're like brother and sister, so I will hit
If you see shoving, just ignore it.
Okay, microphone only for me. This is going to be so full of content. Okay, my name is Jaime Masters. I run a show called Eventual Millionaire. I've interviewed 400 and something millionaires. I'm like the old lady for podcasting. I've been doing it for almost 7 years now, and I'm a business coach. That's all about me. That's all you need to know. Would you say please?
So Jamie was my business coach.
Oh,
starting out. My name is Ryan Gray. I'm a physician by training, and I left practice to please my mother. And now I am a full-time podcaster, media company person to help students get into medical school. So I have 5 podcasts. I do daily video, books, and lots of other things.
Well, my name is Toni Husbands, and I run a site, debtfreedivas.org. My site is all about helping and encouraging individuals to accept and embrace the idea of living debt-free. I run a podcast, The Midday Money Show, which actually I didn't know was a podcast when I initially got into this business, and I didn't know that was a thing. I just knew I liked talking, and I liked telling stories, and I liked hearing other people's stories about getting out of debt. So I've been running my podcast actually since 2012. About old lady. So I've been in this game for a while. But again, I use my podcast as a part of my overall scheme in terms of helping, motivating, and encouraging people to get out of debt.
And I'm Lee Rankinen. I have a podcast network. We have 5 separate podcasts where we actually curate and narrate content of bloggers and authors. And the main reason we're here is our second biggest show is Optimal Finance Daily. So we read from a lot of writers and bloggers that are here at this conference.
So before we get started, I want to know who is already podcasting besides Mindy and Felicia in this room. Sweet. Okay, so the ones who aren't, don't bother. Really, we can tell who you are. So I think I want you guys to go deeper into talking about why you decided to podcast and where the opportunities to monetize started to kind of bubble up as you started going through the process. We'll go from Lee back.
So why we started podcasting?
And then where were the opportunities to monetize within that? And
Sure. So we started about 2 years ago. Justin and myself, my business partner, had done mobile apps prior. It just wasn't a very fulfilling job or business that we had created for ourselves. So we wanted to get into self-development, personal finance, health, all areas of interest for both of us. We looked into content creation. I'm not a great writer. My business partner's not a great writer. So Justin had a great idea and said, well, what if we actually became almost like a writer discovery service where we're reading content, curating it, giving an intro, outro, and then narrating content that's already really well researched and written. And what if we did that? So we started with our first podcast, which is self-development, minimalism. And then our second one was Optimal Finance Daily. And then as far as monetization goes, we do the vast majority of our monetization comes from ad sponsorships right now. We do a little bit of affiliate. But we try to keep everything kind of in message with our podcast. So we do have to turn down a lot of opportunities in terms of sponsorships that just don't fit really well with what we're doing.
Lee, so when you started podcasting, were you reaching out to people, or did it just start coming up organically, or did it happen both ways?
We reached out to a number of kind of more high-profile writers before we ever started, because we needed some social proof. We needed to get started. We needed somebody to kind of have some faith in us and say, yeah, this is a great idea. Why don't you guys take my content and run with it? And we were able to do that. We got a few on board before we ever launched the first podcast.
So I'm going to have the rest of you guys share what you've done, and then we're going to go into the social proof piece and how you can get people to buy into what you're doing when you're at 0 downloads.
So I started the podcast with a group of 2 others who are no longer with me as an organization, but we started the podcast as a way to have a conversation about a safe space about money. One of the things that I learned in my own experience of paying off $107,000 worth of consumer debt was that there are often things that, as smart as I was as an individual, as good as I was on my job, I just knew squat about personal finances. And that translated into some of the decisions we made about personal finances, which translated into the amount of debt that we found ourselves in. And as I looked around, especially in my own family, people who were had the outward appearance of success and all the accolades of professionalism were struggling financially. That was one of the things I noticed in my own family and in my own situation, and I wondered how many other people were dealing with this as well. And so I also noticed that we don't talk about finances until there's a major catastrophe, till somebody's losing a house or till somebody's car is being repossessed, and at that point we're trying to ante up money. So my idea was because it was still hard for me to approach people that I knew about the situations they were going through. So I thought about, well, if we had these conversations, which we did, we started to have these conversations in a lighthearted manner, with our personality, and it actually drew people. So it was years before people, especially that I knew, were telling me, oh, I'm listening to your podcast. Oh, I learned something from that. So that's why that was the initial impetus for starting the podcast, to have a safe space conversation about finances where nobody felt judged, where people could learn, where people could get answers to things that they were otherwise afraid to ask. And in terms of monetization, it's kind of happened for me organically because, like I told y'all, I didn't know back in 2012 that this was a podcast situation. But in terms of monetization, I've done things like I've actually been more out of the box in terms of, we haven't really done advertising, going after advertisers per se. But what I would do is when I interviewed people who were business, who had some type of business or service that they wanted to share, then I would contract with them to sponsor the podcast. And so that was a way for me to get started with Facebook ads. That was a way for me to get the ball rolling initially. And now what I do is I work with brands. So I work with brands I add the podcast as a way, as a component of the overall package that I pitch to brands in terms of getting their message out, in terms of running campaigns, but also in terms of generating income for me.
So Toni, do you do, like, when you create a package, do you do mid-rolls, end-rolls, like pre-roll, or you write a couple of blog articles? What does a package look like?
Actually, I found the most success when I do something where I deal with a subject that I know my audience is interested in, and then I incorporate the brand into that. So it's a little bit more organic. It's not like, oh, we're pushing personal capital or we're pushing some particular product or service, but they might be an interview, a guest on my podcast talking about a particular issue that is of interest to my audience. And so that's the way that I kind of package my packages, my campaigns.
So that allows your sponsor to control the narrative of their product.
Right.
Okay. Ryan?
So I started podcasting because Jamie said it was going to make me rich and famous.
And it did.
Yeah. Oh.
And
It really did, guys.
It did. I started podcasting because I didn't like writing content, and so I wanted a different way to get my message, my voice across. And I listened to a lot of podcasts, so I said, I'll try it. I'm a huge introvert, and so I could sit in my kitchen and record on my microphone and record some podcasts. And that was 257 weeks ago, and haven't missed a week yet. And so I first found monetization 17 weeks in. I reached out to a test prep company for my audience. Pre-med students need to take tests to get into medical school. And I reached out to a test prep company. I said, hey, this is great content for my podcast. Can I interview one of your tutors and talk about the MCAT and help students? We'll talk about something that comes up a lot, and then we'll offer a special coupon code that's more than what you guys normally offer. It'll be a short term, maybe a month or so. And so that was my first dive into an affiliate relationship with anybody. And so going with them skyrocketed my downloads, because I was still very small then. But I still have a very nice spike in my download numbers from that episode, because they're a big test prep company, and so they promoted it, which increased exposure for my brand. But I also got a check for like $700 or $800 from them for that one episode.
Did they put you on Facebook? Did they put you on Facebook? Like, how did they promote your show? Like, did you?
I don't remember.
You don't even know? Okay.
It was a long
no
time
worries.
ago.
No worries. Okay. Jamie.
So the trend is we hate writing, so therefore we talk instead. So my blog was 6 months old, and Pat Flynn, who probably everybody at FinCon sort of knows, was in my mastermind group. And I was like, I hate writing. So they're like, oh, start a podcast. So somebody in my mastermind group goes, you should interview millionaires. My site's called Eventual Millionaire. And I'm from the middle of nowhere in Maine, and I knew 0 millionaires total. And I asked my mentor, and he was like, oh, you should, nobody that I know will ever go on your podcast saying that they're a millionaire. 400 and something people later, right? I'm booked till past February, and it's the best networking tactic ever, because I was a business coach for 3 years offline before I ever did this. But in the middle of nowhere in Maine, driving around to small businesses, really hard to get a hold of people. And the podcast is a great way, especially when I started 7 years ago, to go one to many, where people feel like they actually really know you. But I had a business before I started my podcast, which is not sort of the typical way you hear people doing things. They're like, oh, I'll start content first. And I teach people how to do this now, so I will get on a horse, just so you know.
I'll cut you off.
Be prepared, people. I tell everybody what to do, not just people that pay me. But when we're looking at sort of the landscape now, it really has changed a lot, right? And so a lot of people say monetization, I say revenue. That's just how I grew up.
Purist.
Very different. Monetization. Because to me, looking for a business model first, really important. There's definite people that will do, I've done sponsorships also. I've had clients that have gotten sponsorships before their podcast has even come out before, which is awesome, right? You're like, I got money and I didn't do anything yet. That's great. But it does take quite a few download numbers in order to be able to get sort of $700 or $800 for a sponsorship. Does that make sense? So I personally monetize in many other ways, and I don't actually have that many sponsorships, to tell you the truth, because I don't like people telling me what to do. And since sponsorships can be a pain in the butt sometimes also. So, in a nutshell.
I have an interesting perspective on this because I have two very different podcasts. So I have one that's about money, but I have one that's about Colorado. And so that one's different because you can just walk around your town if you have one that's based on your town or region. And those people will buy in much more quickly and easily because they get excited. So I think the difference is if you have a podcast that's regional, even if it's about money, there actually could be a lot more opportunities than you would expect to partner with like a credit union. In my town, Ibotta is, if you're familiar with Ibotta, the savings app, it's a Colorado app. I've met with the CEO many times. I've been in a mastermind group with them. And so if you are in a town that has nationally based or national companies that are headquartered in your town, that is something to consider, to reach out to them. It's much more easy for them to buy into what you do and be excited because you're looking at their face. So I've met Brian many times. He's CEO of like a 500-person company, and I've had like time, and his time is very expensive. And he was very happy to do it because he knows what I'm doing. So I want to kind of dive a little more into social proof, especially because a lot of people don't understand what podcasts are. So when you guys are podcasting, do people understand what they are? Like when you, like outside of your normal, like geeky friends like us, raise your hand if they're like, yeah, I get it. No one's raising their hand. I can't tell if that means that, okay. So I got two people going like, and that guy's like, maybe, I don't know. So basically, you're trying to get people sold on the medium of content that you're sharing. So how do you, provide social proof on a show that has 0 downloads? Lee, I'm looking at you.
So again, for us, it really helped because we got the minimalists on board before we ever launched our first episode.
Goddamn.
Yes.
Okay.
So they said yes.
That's
can
a
use
big
our
deal.
content. They also happened to launch their Netflix documentary shortly thereafter and launched their podcast shortly after we launched our first one. So they brought a lot of people into podcasting when they decided to move into podcasting themselves, and they were also very helpful in promoting our show. They said, hey, if you guys want to hear some more of our content in audio form, check out Optimal Living Daily. And they would send people right over to us. So it was right from the start. It's luck, right? We reached out to the right people. They were very gracious to say, yes, you can use our stuff. And that's just kind of where it snowballed from there.
So they weren't bros that you were playing basketball with. Like these were the minimalists were complete strangers to you.
Complete strangers.
So if you guys in the audience, because I'm kind of geeked out that he's saying this. So for those of you in the audience who started monetizing in the audience? I know you three did. Okay. No. Okay, so Mrs. Our Next Life, I know what's going on. So for those of you who haven't monetized, I'm going to ask a question very quickly within the middle of our panel, because I do that. Why not? Like, why haven't you monetized? So, like, two people. Felicia?
I will say, but my podcast is so new, I haven't even figured out how to monetize yet.
He reached out to the minimalists. So I would say that's a really good point. What would you guys say to that?
I have a story for that, actually, in terms of someone starting from zero. One of the things that you can use, and I totally agree with building your business first, one of the things you can use is PR. We were able to get media, national media, in a couple of ways, and I'll tell you why, which actually gave us the initial spike in terms of the social proof, the numbers, the download numbers, and the audience, started to build our audience. So we were actually selected as it sounds so silly, but as the weekly winner of a national drive time, evening time drive time a radio show. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Michael Baisden, but he had a national show probably back around 2012 when we first got started. So we filled out a little form, and we were interviewed for like maybe a minute spot on his national afternoon rush hour drive time radio program. And our social proof, that actually took off. So just a small form, think about things like that. I'm in Chicago, I'm located in Chicago, and so I would fill out, I would contact the local media, the local television shows. They're always looking for content, they're always looking for experts, so I would fill out those, send them an email, oh, we have this going on. If I was talking about a particular issue, especially if you can tie it into something current, some kind of current event type idea, send that off to the producers. They're always looking for people to come on and fill that air. So those are other ways that we were able to, in the very beginning when we had no listeners, no social following, no idea what we were actually doing, we were able to boost our initial traction. And of course, then we take that, we put it on our website, we're blasting that out on our social media platforms, and that's a way to say, oh, wow, it's a cute name, because that's what I would always hear. Cute name, I like the name, what do you do? And then it draws people in, so it draws in your target audience, and then you can start sharing the weekly shows that you're doing, or weekly, daily, however you're doing it. But that's a way to draw people in, because if they see you, Michael Baisden is talking about these girls, whoa, they must know what they're doing. And it was so funny, because we had just started, and I'm just like, wow, people are actually paying us to coach them, all because somebody that we didn't know in Florida had us on up for a 2-minute radio interview. So that's one way to look at it.
Ryan, in your case, you're dealing with medical students with $500,000 in debt. So how do you get them to believe that you know what the hell you're doing? And two, what was, you talked about the MCAT, but when you walked into that office, did you walk into an office? Did you email? How did you get in front of those people? How were you audacious to get them to hear you? Like, what did you do?
So that was the hard part for me. There was nobody in my space that I could get on an evening radio show or some big podcasters that just made an awesome documentary. I love those guys, by the way. I wish my wife would subscribe to that.
She's
I
not
love
watching.
you, dear.
I'm so glad you said that.
So that was the hard part for me. And I've never been able to do that. I've never been able to go out to somebody and steal their audience. And so mine has been completely organic, one person at a time on social media, interacting, providing value. I'm really the leader in my niche to do that, so it's hard. I was able to, there was a forum, a website out there, who I had a great relationship with, and so I would post in there. They let me post in there and post links to my stuff, and that added a little bit of early traction. I now own that website, but so that was a struggle, and that may be a struggle for you, and just understand that and know that it's going to take a little bit longer. You're not going to have any huge surges in traffic from somebody famous mentioning you.
Jamie, you're interviewing these millionaires in Maine, and I've been to Maine. It's very beautiful, but with blood-sucking flies. Seriously. So first of all, you have to reach out to these millionaires. You have to find them. How did you make yourself legitimate in order to even find them? And then what does your money model, your business model look like? How does revenue come into your business?
So being in the middle of nowhere, really, I cold emailed a whole bunch of people. On iTunes, I went on iTunes first, and I looked up the word millionaire. And this was a long time ago, so there wasn't very many of them. So I just asked the people that already said that they were millionaires on other people's shows, and they all said yes. I was like, oh. But I thought it was going to be like one a month. I thought maybe I could get one a month at the most. And what's insane is I started using Help a Reporter Out. Have you guys ever heard of that? So that helped both with the credibility side, because I had been, and this is how my cold email went, by the way. If you ever want anyone on a show, you cold email, and you definitely need some sort of social proof, because people that are important will not go on your show if you don't say this. And if you don't say some reason, otherwise we get questions and asked to be on shows all the time. And so I was like, I've been on CNN and blah, 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 blah. And you name drop and you do whatever you can possibly do. So I had gotten on Fox News from Help a Reporter Out way back when. And so I would name drop that. And then when I went to look for new millionaires, I used Help a Reporter Out as the journalist and said, I'm looking for people that are willing to say they're millionaires. They made it in business only, because I'm a business coach. And I got 35 responses. And I was like, well, maybe that's not the 12 that I thought I needed for the year. And so, of course, we had to vet them, because not everybody was good at all. But we got like 20 out of that. And then I got referrals. And now it is the best networking tactic ever, by the way. I think I had 4 people here. I know a millionaire. Let me introduce you. We have a wait list of millionaires. We have a guy I just got introduced. He has $140 million net worth. And I'm like, he's going to go on my wait list till February. I'm so sorry. Like, how crazy is that from the girl from nowhere in Maine? Just saying. I'm like, oh, totally. You have to be on my wait list. Talk to my assistant. Right? But that's what cheekily, but it's kind of fun at the same time. Okay, so then because I've been a business coach for so long, I've coached forever, feels like forever, for over 10 years. So even just on my coaching side, it's gone from $150 an hour to $1,500 an hour, right? So I only coach high-level, 7-figure, usually entrepreneurs now. But we run mastermind groups. We have group coaching programs. I sell my own stuff. We definitely do affiliate stuff, but not as much, because I will only do affiliates or sponsorships with people that I actually use their stuff. Who knew? But we negotiate really good rates on sponsorships too. Like the 35 CPM that people will tell you, I'm like, no, you can do so much better than that. And so some of my clients have very different monetization strategies, but we're looking at the business as a whole. And to me, podcasting, content marketing in general, is a marketing tactic to get people to buy something, right? So if these big sponsorship companies, they're making money off of you and your audience. That's why they're paying you money. So if you sell something, then you can make money off them too, even if they're very small. We've done lists with 300 people on them and made a lot of money. So don't think that my list is too small. We can definitely talk about growing that too, but don't ever think, I have to wait until it gets to be humongous. Because podcasts, to me, you get a connection that you can't have other places, right? They're like, I feel like I know you, which is something that you can't really get in blogging. Does that make sense?
Do you think that your list, this is for everyone, is warmer because they've been listening to you over time and they feel connected? So when you do a launch or you share a product or you do something where money would be exchanged, they're more likely to buy even with a small list?
No, but yes.
Okay.
So no, because
Okay.
you're making the assumption that everybody in your list is also listening to your podcast, and that's
Right.
just not true. People are signing up for your list likely through your website. Don't assume that they've also listened to your podcast.
I actually segment my list because I use ConvertKit. So I'm teasing Ryan a little bit, but really I do segment my list. So I know how people are coming in onto the list. So if they're coming in via my podcast, these are specific opt-ins from the podcast. That way, when I do anything in the future, the messaging is very specific to that group of people. Do you guys do that?
I think that it helps. I think it definitely helps. I think anytime that you can put yourself out in a different format, then you help people who relate to you in a different way, whether you're using video, whether it's audio. I like the idea of audio because I like the idea of podcasts myself because I can listen to them while I'm doing something else. While I'm around the house, I listen to Bigger Pockets a lot because I'm doing something, I'm learning while I'm being productive around the house, and I think that's why I like the idea of podcasts because it doesn't make my audience sit in one spot, and they can connect with me, they can carry me with me, they can listen to me while they're on the go, which is what I know a lot of my audience do, and so I think that it is a way to make a connection with your list. I send my list, my podcast, I send announcements about each podcast when they come out each week to my list as well. So I know that I have an idea of, and he's right, not everybody is listening to your podcast that's on your list, but you can also have an idea of how much your audience is connecting with you through your podcast, through your list, if you use tools like ConvertKit.
I had a question. Actually, it was very good, but I just kind of go while I think about it.
I'll always talk, just so we know. So to me, knowing whether it be video or audio, you can actually get to know that person better. Me and Pat Flynn were at a coffee shop here in Dallas, and we were just having a little mastermind meeting, and some guy goes, "Are you Pat Flynn?" Right? And so he's like, "Oh, are you part of FinCon?" And he's like, "No, I own this coffee shop here." So he randomly knows Pat Flynn. If Pat was only writing and had no audio, because his voice is so, you have a great radio voice too, you're like, People will know the voice and feel like they know you instead of just reading like a blog. So when I talk to big podcasters, I'm like, does it actually give you more ROI than writing? And they're like, no, but it not necessarily, because you do have to pull them off of your podcast in order to have them on a list and email them and that sort of thing. But it helps for engagement, helps for trust. It helps them feel like they actually know you. You're in their ears, which is kind of crazy. I have people, even at this conference, come up to me and be like, I feel like I know you. And I'm like, nice to meet you, right? And, yeah, that's my funnel. Nice to meet you, give me money. But you can't get that in other mediums, right? We're so thankful that the voice can carry so much more and they can feel like they actually know you. So it drives engagement and trust to me. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll be like, oh, I need that product more. Especially audio might not even be as better for selling as video or a written sales page. But still, I think it really adds to the commitment to the people.
I want to, it is. Ryan actually talked about email lists, and I want to kind of go a little deeper into the synergy between the show and your website and your list. So kind of talk about it. Do you have a synergy? Like, when you're looking at your show, how are you incorporating the website so that if they land on your website, it's optimized so that they're listening to the show, maybe there's an affiliate link or a cookie, or talk about what your strategy is so that you get the most out of each listener contact or reader contact, depending on how they find you?
Sure. So for us, it's a little different because our focus really is the podcast. We do have a website, we have a blog, not a lot of content out there outside of our podcast. So our list is most likely almost 100% podcast listeners that came over to the site. So we do a call to action on the vast majority of each podcast episode, just to make sure we're trying to connect people over. Because it takes multiple times to get somebody off of their phone. Maybe they're driving, maybe they're doing the dishes, cleaning the house, whatever. They might have headphones in. They're not going to pop off their phone right there and go right to the website. So it does take multiple points of contact to catch them at the right time where they can go sign up. We also have a text option where they can text in to join the mailing list. That helps because people have their phones. They're probably more likely to do that than try to go onto your website. So.
I think again, with me, the podcast is a component. So I'm also driving people to my podcast. A lot of people find me through social media, and then they're on my list, and then I'm driving them to the podcast. I think that's more of how I use it. And my main purpose of the podcast, again, is to build, because I'm all about having money conversations and creating safe spaces. So I'm more focused, especially with the podcast, because I'm bringing stories. I'm telling people how, I'm sharing stories about how people have accomplished major financial goals in their life. And so my idea with the podcast is building community, building trust, so that this person can join my accountability groups, they can purchase my courses, they feel comfortable that I have accomplished this goal that they're trying to accomplish, and therefore they can trust me to help shepherd them through the process. And so that's my goal of using the podcast, is, again, building community, creating a sense of connection, which I hope that I'm doing, and then ultimately leading them to what I hope will help them solve their problem.
So my website at this point is basically a repository for my show notes. I don't do any written content anymore. Looking to get back into it eventually. But it's really just show notes. So when people go to my website, I do get a lot of great organic search traffic from Google, from some older written content that I have. But once somebody's on my website, my goal is to get them to the podcast. So I have podcasts in my menu bar. I have on my main page a pretty picture of somebody holding a phone with podcasts and some social proof around that. So that's 100% of my goal.
So I use podcasting as one distribution method, but I'm also on YouTube, and sort of you take one piece of content and you try and put it everywhere. So even we have teasers on Facebook and we promote that. So it's sort of a holistic strategy. So yes, some people listen to the podcast and that's awesome, but I know some people watch videos instead, and we have a bunch of SEO stuff also and written content also. So it's not really the aggregator to the podcast first and then down, but it's been one of my best marketing tactics ever to get people to even know what I'm doing. So I have a book and sell a lot of other things too, and it starts to get to know me on the podcast side. You can come from iTunes or whatever, and they'll come this way, and then they'll pay attention to the other content that we have. We do guides and that sort of stuff. And we do that with calls to action, just like he said, but we'll write specific worksheets based on whoever I have as a guest. So if they say like an exercise, we'll have a whole worksheet written up and be like, oh, go get the worksheet here. Because like he said, it's really hard to get people to go from phone running around like a crazy person or exercising to take some sort of action. And if you can train your listeners to actually pay attention and go, that's something good enough that I'm willing to remember to write this down and or go do it later or right now, is really important also. So we try and take them from all the mediums and use whatever medium they like best. So podcasters listen to podcasts, right? So being able to keep them on the audio side is great, but pulling them out for more deeper content I think is really, really important too. Because no offense, but if you only listen to audio, a lot of times you're not a video guy. Like you don't want to have I have a video podcast also. A lot of people are like, it's too much space on my phone or whatever reason. And that's fine too, but I want to give them what they want when they want it. So that way they're consuming what they want and I'm not just throwing what I think they want at them. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I tend to, so when I do an episode, I'm trying to answer a question, and not only am I reaching out to people that I think would be of interest to my listeners and myself, but I'm thinking about SEO. Quite honestly, like if I pin this episode, is this something that is the main question being answered within the show, something that people are going to search for? If they find me via Pinterest, because I pin all of my episodes, if they find me via Pinterest, maybe they don't go onto my list, maybe they click on a resource that I shared. And then they're cookied for a while and then make a purchase later. So I kind of think about the whole journey of getting to the show, but also I look at it the other way as a blogger. So I'm kind of working it from both angles so that if you find my written content, maybe you're like, I just want to read it and I'll ignore the podcast because I don't have an iPhone and I don't want to bother. But your answers are still answered within the post. But if you are like, wow, you've answered my question, I want to use that tool, I do cookie them. And all the affiliates I like to use tend to be long-term affiliates with easy wins. So Digit is a good example of that, where if you're a person who's nervous about reaching out to people for sponsorships, you can easily become an affiliate of a lot of things. And I literally make mid-roll or end-roll commercials, or mid-roll or pre-roll commercials, and I'm just like, this, if it's appropriate, this episode is, I'm a proud affiliate of Ibotta. If you're trying to save money on booze, please, I want to give you $10. I've actually pre-recorded these ads, made clear that I disclosed that I'm an affiliate, because that's very important. And then that way, if I share an episode with people, they hear both as a listener how the show is, so it's not surprising to them. If you're a newer podcaster, you'll be like, okay, and you're nervous about adding ads later, you can start adding them now, so it makes your listener used to it. So I just created my own ad with affiliates that I use already, and I'm like, do you want $10? Because with that affiliate, you get $10 after you redeem your first savings. And that's a very easy way to start monetizing. And honestly, it's a long-term process, but a year from now, when you have a heck of a lot more downloads and people go to that episode, you're making money. So it's a really easy way to get your listeners used to ads, but also for you to get used to placing it and just kind of creating the synergy within your show. So it's 1:12. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to talk about, but I can't remember it, so it's okay. So questions, Mindy?
To piggyback off of this, you said you pre-record ads. Do you all pre-record ads, or do you read them live? Sometimes when I'm listening to our show, it sounds like, I'm at this energy level.
Don't do that. As a podcast listener as well as a creator, don't do that.
Do you record live then?
Yes, I do. When I do ads, I don't do many ads, but when I do, I don't always drink whatever the commercial is. When I do ads, it's a live read. It meshes with the podcast as perfectly as possible.
Okay, and do you worry about making a mistake while you're reading the ad?
Audio is editable, which I didn't learn. So if you haven't started a podcast yet, so when I started, and I read my first podcast, right? I scripted it out and read it. And if I screwed up reading a word, I would start over.
Oh my God.
10 minutes in, 15 minutes in, I started over. Don't be like me.
Oh, wow. I'm glad to hear you say that, though, because it's not just me. Christy, do you do it live, or do you read it?
I pre-recorded. I tried that and I didn't like it. And so, and I honestly don't even like the idea of ads that much, because I'm one of those people, I'll fast forward. I'll fast forward through ads. So I actually prefer to I prefer to work with brands where I'm bringing people on, where I'm doing it as part of a campaign, because I just don't necessarily care for that as a podcast listener. And it just, to me, the pre-recorded ads it made it choppy, it took away from the flow, and but if I were to, I would definitely prefer to read it. But I guess I do read it by bringing people on live and letting them kind of talk about their service.
pre-recorded ads, as she just mentioned, if you tend to fast forward through ads, it tells the listener, hey, it's time to fast forward now, because here comes an ad.
Right.
And the host read, live read once, it's like, oh, I've been listening to an ad the last 20 seconds, so well, might as well keep listening.
So, well, and yeah, there's a difference too between like an ad from your people and you actually reading the ad. So I tell my people that I take their money that I need to make this really, really fruitful for my listeners. So we've done ones with FreshBooks, and I said, okay, great, but I'm going to make them 2, 3, 4 minutes long, and then I'm going to make it content driven. Yep. And I'll talk about your stuff, but I'm going to say it the way I want to say it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not trying to go, hi, I'm so great. This is the boring ad now, right? Like that sucks too. And that's a waste of my people's time. And that's why I don't do ads most of the time. So if it's a product that I actually like and I am excited about, I try and fit it into what I think they would need anyway and give them a tip and be like, and this is this. And yes, it's definitely pre-recorded because I don't want the millionaire to sit there listening to let me talk about this, right? But the energy level definitely has to feel the same.
Yep, and we do live reads as well. Everything we do is scripted, so we do the reads, we do edit it afterwards because there's usually a few mistakes in there. But yeah, it's all live read.
I tend to be, in general, unscripted in life. So sometimes for me it's a little, I think that you know your listener and you know the listening experience that you want them to have. And as podcasters, I don't think there's any one way. You play around with it until you find what is comfortable for you, because it's your show. You know what I'm saying? So
I was just gonna say, I do video, so I can't edit it out as easy as just audio, by the way. So like when I mess up, and I tell the millionaires when I interview them, I'm like, if you mess up, good, we like it. We like, you're a real person. It's gonna be awesome. So we really don't edit very much at all, not even for ums and ahs. And I think that's okay too. It just depends on what you like.
Questions? Sir?
So, I podcast for much the same reason. I'm not very good at writing. But I have an email list, which I don't do much with, because I'm not good at writing. So is there some other way to kind of mesh the two, that I could do something with my email list to send maybe a voice recording, or how would I better use my voice in my emails without having to write?
It's a great question.
We're gonna fight over the mic to talk to
These two, I swear.
Go ahead.
Rev.com.
Exactly.
Have talk. You're a talker, right? We're all talkers. That's why we're up here. Rev.com. Download the app on your phone. It's a transcription service. It's a little pricey at $1 a minute, but it's super accurate. Transcribe or dictate what you want to say, and in less than 24 hours, if it's short like an email, it's probably only a couple hours, you'll get back something that you can just copy and paste.
How does that come across? Because my daughter does a lot of my editing for me, and she's like, when you speak, that's one thing. When you read, it's another. You're going to have...
It's your voice. It's perfect.
I'm kidding.
You know what I was thinking?
Wait.
Oh,
Okay.
go ahead. No,
So
go ahead.
I agree. So I do the same. We'll do the transcript, which is great. But then I have a ghostwriter because I hate writing, and she knows my voice. And she was a client of mine, and I read it, and I'm like, she writes this better than I would write this. And so. because it's the exact same thing. I hate writing, and when I write it, there's grammatical error. We have to go through like 3 checks in order for it to go through if I write it, which sucks. But it's really not as expensive as you'd think, too, if you can especially get a copywriter that actually is newer to the scene, that just writes better than we do because we're talkers, aren't writers. And that you might even want to ask your daughter and see if she can sort of make it sound a little bit better.
She screams at me first.
You know what I was thinking when you said that? They talked about getting, transcription services, but I thought, why not do an outtake or some additional audio content that was not in your show that they could be excited about receiving?
Have you tried that though? Okay, sorry. I'm also an interviewer, so I'm going to ask you questions. But when you're in your phone, like in Gmail, do any of you would you ever click on audio? Like I've sent videos like Loom of like, hey, it's Jamie, but I don't go to audio when I'm doing my email, either on my phone or not.
Well, I'm gonna disclose something I haven't. So I'm using
see,
a
I'm good at
new.
this.
Well, I'm experimenting with some stuff, and those of you who have met me because I've been speed dating all the newbies because there's so many of you guys. I'm going to contact you a certain way. And it's going to be really interesting to see what the response will be. I'm not going to say what the tool is. However, I would actually click on audio if I felt it was safe. So if it was like a safe audio, like if it was in an audio file that made sense to me, yeah, absolutely, why not? Like,
I'm going to steal your information.mp3.
yeah. Stalker.com. So no, I would ignore you, but yeah, like why not? Why not?
I will say, I will click on audio, and that's how I ended up working with my business coach, because I get so many things, and she sent me a SoundCloud message saying, hey, I was thinking about you, and she told me about a program, and I instantly signed
See, but was that personal, or was that two
It
or a
felt
whole entire
personal,
list?
didn't
It was personalized, but I get her emails all the time, and I don't read them until she sent that.
So, which I get. So I'll read and or listen to like videos when I know that it's personal. When I know it's a bulk message, it feels like an ad to me. But that's just me. Does it? Who? Sorry, I'm going to poll the audience. Who would actually listen to audio if it was via Gmail? Like, okay. So maybe not do that. Right? Because I don't know. When I go, who's my audience and what do they do? I would ask the audience just like I did, and be like, would you actually listen?
I guess the question is I would probably follow a link that would take me somewhere to audio
Yeah.
versus the actual audio file coming.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
You can A/B test if
Yeah.
your email allows you to do that.
But you probably still have to click this link now.
Vernon?
So, how are you guys utilizing Instagram to grow your podcast and your email list?
I use a tool that I can never remember the name of that creates an audio picture. So I actually create a snippet from the show, and then once you hit the Instagram photo, you hear a snippet of the show, and then I have a link for that day to drive people to the show.
Yeah, that's audiogram.spare.
No, that's not the one I use. That's why I can't
Using
remember it.
Wave.
Wait.
No, it's not that one either. I'm telling you, I can't remember it, and it's none of those. So, what about you guys? Sorry.
So I use Instagram. My audience are young college kids, and guess what? They're all on Instagram. So I started using Instagram about a year ago, and I use it when I remember and try to be as. So one of the things I hate from a marketing standpoint is one piece of content going out to all of the social media channels. Every social media channel has its own pulse, has its own style, and so you have to match their style. So I don't make something for Facebook and put it on Instagram. I make something specifically for Instagram. I use their stories. I reached out to Instagram influencers when I published my book and said, hey, this is your audience. Maybe they would love a book. I'm giving away 50 of them. And they're like, oh, Dr. Gray, I listen to your podcast. I'm like, score, right? So reach out to the influencers in the audience in Instagram for your audience, but specifically write and post specific content in Instagram for Instagram.
Yeah. And I have a picture pulled up, so after this, if you want to see how the audio picture is, I'm happy to share it. I think that gentleman over there, I feel like someone.
I was just going to comment with regards to using audio. It really depends upon where I receive it. If I'm in the office where I've got speakers or headphones, that's an easy click.
Right.
If I'm on mobile
Yeah.
and I'm not on earbuds,
Yeah.
it's not convenient.
You're
Right.
gonna be one of those people in the thing going, oh.
And actually, when you initially find a podcast, this is just a question for the audience. Say, for example, you're on your cell and you find the podcast. Do you bookmark it later and go on your laptop to listen to it? Or what happens for you guys? And anyone can shout it out.
My phone.
Who's it? What? Your phone?
My mobile, I do everything on my
Okay.
So stay on mobile.
Okay.
I just go on iTunes and subscribe.
Okay. And I wanted to actually touch on something. So who uses Libsyn? Okay, so are you guys including cookied links in your RSS feed when you upload your show? So you know how when you go into Libsyn and you upload your show, and then you can put in your show notes? Are you guys using Libsyn for real? So when you upload your show, you can write all your show notes. When you're doing that, that's an opportunity to share an affiliate link, especially a cookied link. And one of the things that's happening with affiliate links, there's a change in the technology that's happening. So companies are now learning to identify how users interact with their affiliate links. So if you click on an affiliate link on a phone, but you go to a laptop and actually make the purchase, these companies are now starting to create the technology to follow the same person via different devices. So you as content creators and marketers, that's something that you guys need to be kind of watching for in the programs that you're joining. There's a company called Awin I'm in Colorado. It's headquartered in Colorado, so I speak to the marketing person for that quite a bit. And they are aggressively doing that because even though I use my phone quite a bit, I'm really nearsighted. And so typically I prefer to make purchases and stuff off my laptop that cost too much money. You know what I mean? Because it's just easier for me. And depending on the age of the listener, honestly, and physical disabilities like mine, you may have listeners who do the same thing. So if you are providing a link on your mobile-friendly, site, that's great, but they may end up purchasing or doing something, taking action on their laptop. So you may want to start kind of seeing, is this program going to track the same user across platforms? So that's just something, FYI, that's out there, that's happening. So like Siri and that kind of technology, I think is all kind of interconnected. So just as a random thing you may not know, think about it as you look at affiliates to join. Who does events, by the way, associated with their podcast? What is your podcast and what's the event that you do? If I may ask, you don't have to tell me.
Taping the Hyde Boston College.
Wait, say what?
Taping the Hyde Boston College
Okay.
podcast.
All right.
And the Greater Milwaukee College Workshop is the event.
Do you get paid? Yeah, there's no wrong or right answer, but since it's monetization, I'm curious about that.
It's not directly from the event, no.
Okay.
It's a free event.
Okay.
I get clients from it.
There you go. So for those of you who are creating podcasts, which is a lot of you, there's an opportunity to safely pull listeners from the ether to in front of you. So think about that as you kind of consider your monetization strategy, which actually Jamie, I think, is probably the best person to talk about with that. Share your skills.
Like
with
getting
a Z.
people from the podcast into real life.
Yeah, from the ether to real life. Yeah.
You have to. Yeah, you get them to buy something. No. So I run implementation retreats, and so it's part of the mastermind package. We're actually breaking it off and going to be selling those anyway. To me, meeting people in person, that's why I come to events like this. It makes a bigger difference in the world to be able to actually meet them. But you still have to put them through a funnel. So do you guys know about funnels and stuff like that? Because we're only okay, good. Because
We got
sort of
1.5 minutes.
yeah, I know. We're touching the surface level of this, but we run them through a funnel, which sells them the event, and then they come and fly out for the event. But it's a complicated funnel, so I have a minute. There's no way I could go through the whole piece. But it's
I know.
Yeah, and we're done. We pixel them and send them through the funnel, and it works. Ta-da! That's it.
So definitely grab us if you have more questions. I hope this was of help and gave you guys, do you have ideas like that you hadn't considered? And reach out to us. We've got cards and we got to go or else we're going to get yelled at. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. And we're done.